Good morning and welcome back. This is World Talks, coming to you live from Warsaw. I'm Jastrzębska. For much of the past year, Ukraine has appeared to be on the defensive. But recent weeks have seen a string of Ukrainian successes, from drone strikes deep inside Russia to gains on the battlefield. At the same time, European leaders are pushing for talks and moving ahead with plans to open EU accession negotiations with Kyiv. So are we seeing a real shift in this war? To discuss, I'm joined by Reuben F. Johnson, Director of Research, Casimir Pulaski Foundation. Good morning, sir. Delighted to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
So negotiations on Ukraine's EU accession are due to start tomorrow. Is it only a technical milestone, or does it pose a strategic significance?
I think it's strategically significant, but we don't know what form this is going to take, because the EU itself is a collection of carve-outs and special categories. You have EU countries that are in the Schengen zone, some are not in the Schengen zone, some are in the Eurozone, some are not. You have Norway, which has never joined the EU, but it continues to abide by all the regulations for the most part. So, but the reason I think that it's strategically significant is that if you don't put Ukraine on a path to accession, then you risk creating a sort of a lesser second-class citizen category for other countries, which I don't think is compatible with the EU's values or its system.
But we know that this EU membership, full membership, could take years, and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has suggested a form of associate membership for Ukraine for the time being. Do you think it's a viable option?
It's an option, but only if it's a direct path to permanent membership. That it like I said, you can't have these countries in a permanent secondary citizen class. It just doesn't work.
Now, this week, ambassadors from Britain, France and Germany met Russian officials in Moscow, and they called for a meeting between Zelensky and Vladimir Putin. Zelensky did the same thing in his open letter recently. So do you think this is likely to happen, and if so, then when?
I don't think it's likely to happen. Putin has made it very clear that for a long time that he does not consider Zelensky to be a legitimate leader. This whole Russian diatribe, the country's run by Nazis. Oh, Zelensky hasn't had an election since he was elected the first time. Never mind the fact that every one of Putin's elections are rigged. Okay, who cares? So I think the most we could ever hope for would be a phone call between the two of them, or some kind of a video call. But And where there are very few places Putin can go without fear of being arrested, because there's an arrest warrant out for him from the International Court in The Hague. So you're talking about Geneva or Istanbul, maybe Dubai, someplace like that. I can't see it happening.
But Ukraine has been doing very well on the battlefield in recent weeks. So could this perhaps force Vladimir Putin to come to the negotiating table? Could that be a factor?
I don't think that would force him to go to the negotiating table. It might force a change within Russia itself, which could prove to be very damaging for him. He can't replace the manpower he's been losing. They've tried everything: enlistment bonuses, death benefits for families, and it's the numbers are absolutely staggering in terms of, and I see a lot of videos that are put out on the internet, and you'll see one Russian soldier who's the only one left alive of a group of several hundred, and he says, "Hey, we came here. There were 400 of us. We did our first assault. I'm the only one left." These are irreplaceable losses now, because they've exhausted all of the places they can pull manpower from without declaring a general mobilization. And in the meantime, the Ukrainians have captured some 600 square kilometers of territory back, some of the first gains for almost 3 years. And then you have the fact that on the opening and closing days of Putin's International Economic Conference in St. Petersburg, the delegates were greeted to this plume of black smoke, blocking out the sun as they're walking in and walking out. Just absolutely humiliating. So, and you do hear, one more point, you do hear more and more of people saying that there are members of the elite circle who are getting very, very nervous, and they are asking themselves, how can we stop this? How can we, what's the end of the war and after the war look like? And that's a question the West, I should say, needs to ask itself. What do we want Russia to look like? What do we want Russia to be after this is over? There are not many people are talking about that, but that's a conversation that needs to start right now.
By all means. Let's go back to what you said about Ukraine, because you mentioned 600 square kilometers regained and first sustained monthly decline in Russian-held territory since since late 2023. So are we witnessing a genuine shift on the battlefield, and what has enabled Ukraine to be able to perform so well recently?
Well, several things. One, yes, we are witnessing a shift, and that shift is that the Russians have lost their advantage and they've lost the initiative. You know, the war, you know, major operations no longer take place where the Russians decide they'd like them to be. They take place where the Ukrainians are deciding. And once you've gained the initiative, that gives you a huge advantage. And simply put, the Ukrainians have been very, very innovative and professional. They have the one item which is getting some reporting now that may end up being extremely decisive is that the Ukrainians sort of bifurcated their drone warfare. So you have long-range drones that hit, you know, refineries and oil terminals and strategic sites way behind, you know, hundreds, sometimes even 1,000 kilometers away. But now, more recently, they've perfected the art of what they call mid-range strikes. So they are hitting all of the supply lines, all of the logistics centers, so that the troops, the Russian troops in the front, are being starved of everything: food, water, ammunition, medical supplies, you name it. We've even seen reports of Russian troops abandoning their positions because they no longer have anything to sustain operations with. And this is what is making the difference. And the Russians cannot match this innovation by the Ukrainians. Their system simply doesn't allow it.
But could the situation be potentially dangerous? I mean, with Vladimir Putin growing increasingly frustrated with what's going on the battlefield, is he likely to strike decisively some, you know, Ukrainian city centers? What could happen potentially?
Well, they're going to continue these missile strikes because they're making so many missiles per month, and it's absolutely insane because this is almost a repeat of Nazi Germany with the V-2 rockets. You know, they were psychologically, you know, very frightening that you could hit, you know, the city of London with a ballistic missile. But what it costs you per kilogram of explosive material to deliver that strike is just in several orders of magnitude what it costs you if you're dropping a dumb bomb from an airplane or something. And Russia's been doing this now, and they continue to do this because this is the only weapon they have is striking Ukrainian cities. Now, will he go nuclear? That's the big question everybody always asks. It's hard to see that for a number of reasons. One is that he would lose all of his friends, his backers. You know, the Chinese would say, "I'm sorry, we're out now." Secondly, we know where those nuclear warheads are stored. We would have about 10 days or more of warning if those warheads started to move to be put atop one of these ballistic missiles in place of a conventional warhead, and action would be taken. I would like to think action would be taken by NATO. And thirdly, the prevailing winds blow west to east. So if you drop a nuclear weapon on the Ukrainians, that's going to blow radiation back on your own troops, and not exactly good for morale. And oh, by the way, as Ben Hodges and other people have pointed out, you can't kill 32,000 people with a nuclear weapon unless they're all in the same football stadium, and no one's playing football in time of war. So the cost-benefit analysis just is not in Russia's favor.
Right. Ukraine has been doing very well recently, but what does it need to sustain this performance?
It needs a continued support of the Europeans, and it needs more support from America. But they are, bit by bit by bit, they are becoming self-reliant. They no longer have to beg for permission to use an American weapon to strike a target inside of Russia. They can I mean, I don't think people remember where we were in 2022, 2023, where the thought of a weapon detonating inside of Russian territory launched by the Ukrainians was a horrifying prospect. And we kept hearing this word, oh, escalation, escalation, escalation. This happens every hour almost now. And so they've reached the point where no one can really tell them how to fight this war.
And Reuben, before we go, one question on the Polish-Ukrainian relations. They have been strained recently. However, President Karol Nawrocki is yet to decide whether to revoke the Order of the White Eagle from Volodymyr Zelensky. Do you think Zelensky will make concessions and perhaps rename this military unit? What is going to happen?
It's going to be hard for him to climb down. I've always said that Poland and Ukraine are in a competition to see who can be the bigger victim historically. But yes, it'll be hard for him to climb down. They'll have to find some kind of a face-saving, I don't know, I do not know what it'll be. Maybe it'll be a monument somewhere in Western Ukraine of some kind. But I don't see this as a permanent problem. The two countries need each other. They need each other badly. And lots of people in Poland who understand the relationships and the strategic implications. They say you can't have a strong, secure, safe Poland without a prosperous, functioning, democratic Ukraine next door. And this has been the case way before the war began. People were telling me this at least a decade before. So this will have to be resolved, and it will be resolved somehow. But I can't tell you what it'll be. I wish my crystal ball broke. I'm sorry.
Reuben F. Johnson, thank you so very much for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching World Talks. Please stay tuned for more here on TVP World.